Professor Zyx'nax slithered into the xenobiology lecture hall, his tentacles undulating with barely contained excitement. Today was going to be a good day. No, scratch that, today was going to be a great day. He had a feeling deep in his chromatophores that this lecture would go down in the annals of galactic university history. Settle down, class, he burbled, his voice modulator struggling to contain his enthusiasm. Today we're going to discuss a topic that will make your exoskeletons quiver and your antennae curl. We're diving into the fascinating, terrifying, and utterly perplexing world of Deathworlders. A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. Membranes fluttered, scales rattled, and at least one Jovian gas bag deflated slightly in shock. Now Zyx'nax chuckled, his tentacles waving in a soothing pattern. I know what you're thinking. But Professor, Deathworlders are just a myth, a scary story told to freshly hatched larvae to make them finish their nutrient paste well. I'm here to tell you that they're as real as the 3 moons of Psylocke 7, and twice as dangerous. He paused for dramatic effect, enjoying the mix of terror and fascination on his students' faces, well, on the faces of those who had faces anyway. Today we're focusing on a particularly intriguing species of Deathworlder. They call themselves humans, though in my professional opinion, they should be called how are they not dead yet ions. A ripple of nervous laughter echoed through the room. Zyx'nax grinned, or at least performed the closest approximation his species was capable of. These humans hail from a hellish rock they affectionately call Earth. It's a Class 12 death world, which, as you all should know by now, means it's about as hospitable as the inside of a supernova. He pulled up a holographic image of Earth, spinning slowly in the center of the room. Just look at this nightmare. Tectonic plates that are constantly trying to rearrange themselves, vast bodies of dihydrogen monoxide that can swallow entire civilizations, and atmospheric conditions that change more often than a Rigelian shapeshifter at a costume party. The class stared in horror at the blue and green orb. One student, a silicon-based life form, actually started to crystallize in fear. But that's not even the most incredible part, Zyx'nax continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. These humans? They've managed to not only survive on this death trap but thrive. And do you know how? He paused again, milking the moment for all it was worth. The entire class leaned forward in anticipation, some literally extending eye stalks for a better view. They run on liquid rocket fuel. The silence that followed was so profound that you could have heard a Venusian dust mite sneeze. I'm not joking, class. These madlads have evolved to function on a substance so potent, so dangerous, that it would send most of us into cardiac arrest faster than you can say galactic peace treaty. They call it coffee. Zyx'nax pulled up another hologram, this time of a steaming mug of dark liquid. The class recoiled as one, several students activating personal force fields. This, my dear students, is the elixir of human productivity, a brew so potent that it makes antimatter look like tap water. It contains a stimulant called caffeine, which triggers a cascade of neurochemical reactions in the human brain that would fry most sentient circuits. He started pacing back and forth, his tentacles gesticulating wildly. Imagine, if you will, a substance that can turn a barely functioning, proto-sapient blob into a hyperactive, problem-solving machine in a matter of minutes. That's what this coffee does to humans. It's like watching a Zarblaxian slug suddenly sprout wings and start reciting quantum mechanics. A Medusan student in the front row raised a trembling tentacle. But professor, how is that possible? Wouldn't such a potent stimulant cause severe physiological damage? Zyx'nax let out a bark of laughter that sounded like a malfunctioning waste disposal unit. Oh, my dear sweet summer larva, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the kicker, humans don't just tolerate this stuff, they crave it. They've built entire cultures around its consumption. There are humans out there who won't even speak to other humans until they've had their morning cup of joe, as they call it. Can you imagine? A species so hardcore that they need liquid rocket fuel just to engage in basic social interactions. He pulled up another hologram, this time showing a human office space. The students watched in fascinated horror as humans moved from desk to desk, clutching mugs of the steaming black liquid like it was the very essence of life itself. Observe, class. This is a typical human work environment. Notice how they gather around that machine in the corner. That's not a matter replicator or a FTL communication device. No. That's a coffee maker. It's basically a shrine to their caffeine god, dispensing this miraculous brew on demand. A chlorophyllian student in the back raised a leaf. Professor, are you saying that humans have weaponized this substance? Zyx'nax's eyes glinted with mischief. Weaponized? Oh, my chlorophyll-rich friend, you have no idea. Humans haven't just weaponized coffee. They've turned it into an art form. They have drinks called espressos that are basically concentrated shots of pure energy. Imagine distilling a supernova into a tiny cup, and you're halfway there. He pulled up yet another hologram, this time of a complex-looking coffee machine. This, class, is what humans call an espresso machine. It's not a doomsday device, although I wouldn't be surprised if it could double as one in a pinch. This contraption uses highly pressurized water to extract the very essence of coffee beans. The result? a liquid so potent that it makes most intergalactic spacecraft fuel look like nutrient broth for infant organs. The class was utterly enthralled now, a mix of horror and awe on their various facial appendages. But wait, there's more, Zyx'nax exclaimed, sounding for all the world like a late-night infomercial host. Humans don't stop at just drinking this stuff straight. Oh no, that would be far too simple for these crafty apes. They've developed countless variations, each more baffling than the last. He started listing them off, tentacles counting in the air. There's cappuccino, which is espresso mixed with steamed milk and topped with milk foam. It's like they're trying to disguise the rocket fuel as a cloud. Then there's latte, which is similar but with more steamed milk. Apparently, some humans prefer their high-octane beverages with a side of mammalian lactation. A collective shudder ran through the class at the mention of mammalian bodily fluids. And don't even get me started on frappuccinos. It's like they took perfectly good coffee and said, you know what this needs? Ice and sugar. And more sugar. And maybe some whipped cream. And why not throw some syrup on top? It's madness, I tell you. Delicious. Caffeinated madness. Zyx'nax paused to take a sip from his own nutrient tube, which suddenly seemed incredibly boring in comparison. Now, you might be wondering, Professor, surely there must be some drawbacks to consuming such a potent substance, and you'd be right, to a point. Humans can experience something they call a caffeine crash when the effects wear off. Imagine a star going supernova, and then immediately collapsing into a black hole. That's basically what happens to a human without their coffee fix. He pulled up a split-screen hologram showing a human before and after coffee consumption. The difference was startling. The before human looked like it had been on the losing end of a fight with a black hole, while the after human appeared ready to take on the entire Galactic Federation single-handedly. This class is why humans are so terrifying. They've adapted to function on a substance that would kill most species outright. And not only that, they've turned their dependency into a source of pride. They have t-shirts and mugs with slogans like "Don't talk to me before I've had my coffee" or "Instant human." Just add coffee, they're basically advertising their drug habit to the entire universe. A quantum fluctuation entity at the back of the class raised a probability wave. Professor, does this mean that coffee could be used as a biological weapon against humans? Or could we deprive them of it in case of interstellar conflict? Zyx'nax's tentacles writhed in amusement. An excellent question. But I'm afraid the answer is a resounding no. You see, depriving humans of coffee doesn't weaken them, it makes them more dangerous. A human without coffee is like a cornered Thoracian spine beast, unpredictable, irritable, and prone to lashing out at anything that moves. No. The only thing scarier than a human on coffee is a human going through caffeine withdrawal. He shuddered dramatically, his chromatophores flashing warning colors. There are rumors, unsubstantiated of course, of entire planets surrendering to human forces, not because of superior firepower or tactics, but because the humans ran out of coffee and became so cranky that the opposition just gave up out of sheer terror. The class tittered nervously, not entirely sure if the professor was joking or not. But here's the real kicker, Zyx'nax continued, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. Humans don't just drink coffee to function. They enjoy it. They savor it. They have heated debates about the best way to brew it, the optimal bean-to-water ratio, the ideal temperature for consumption. They turn it into an ice cream flavor for Zorp's sake. Can you imagine taking a substance potent enough to fuel a small spacecraft and thinking, you know what? This would make a great dessert. He shook his head in bemused wonder. It's this kind of thinking that makes humans so unpredictable and frankly terrifying. They take something that should, by all rights, kill them, and they turn it into a cultural cornerstone. It's like watching a species evolve to breathe fire, and then using that ability to roast marshmallows. A holographic image of a human coffee shop appeared in the center of the room. Students gasped as they watched humans of all shapes and sizes congregating, chatting, and working, all while consuming copious amounts of the dark, steaming liquid. This class is what humans call a cafe. It's not, as you might assume, a refueling station for their spacecraft. No, this is where they go to socialize, work, and consume even more coffee. It's like they're constantly preparing for an invasion that never comes, keeping themselves in a perpetual state of caffeinated readiness. Zyx'nax's tentacles waved in a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. You know, sometimes I wonder if coffee isn't the real reason humans haven't made much contact with the galactic community at large. They're probably too busy arguing about whether single-origin Ethiopian beans are superior to Colombian blends to bother with trivial matters like faster-than-light travel or intergalactic diplomacy. He chuckled at his own joke, a sound like gravel in a blender. A few brave students joined in, while others looked around nervously, as if expecting a caffeine-fueled human to burst through the wall at any moment. But let's not forget the true insanity of this situation, Zyx'nax continued, his voice rising with excitement. Humans didn't evolve to consume coffee. They discovered it. Can you imagine? Some ancient human stumbled upon these beans, probably thought, these look poisonous. I should definitely roast them, grind them up, run hot water through them, and then drink the result. And instead of dying horribly, they invented a cultural phenomenon. He shook his head in disbelief. It's like they're playing some cosmic game of chance with their own biochemistry. Oh, look, a new plant. Let's see what happens if we eat it. It's a miracle they didn't poison themselves into extinction before they even discovered fire. The professor pulled up another hologram, this time showing the global distribution of coffee production. Look at this, class. Humans cultivate this stuff on a planetary scale. They've shaped entire ecosystems to produce more of this miraculous bean. There are regions of their planet dedicated solely to growing coffee. Can you imagine? Reshaping your world's biosphere for the sake of a beverage. A hive mind collective in the third row buzzed in confusion. But professor, surely there must be humans who don't consume this. Coffee? Surely not all of them are addicted to liquid rocket fuel. Zyx'nax's tentacles wiggled in what might have been a shrug. Ah yes, the eternal optimist. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the truly mind-bending part. Even humans who don't drink coffee are affected by coffee culture. They have alternatives like decaf, which is coffee with the caffeine removed, which seems to defeat the whole purpose if you ask me, or herbal tea, which is just flavored water masquerading as a coffee substitute. He pulled up a series of images showing various coffee alternatives. Look at these pitiful attempts to replicate the coffee experience without the rocket fuel component. It's like watching a Vulcan trying to impersonate a sun. Sure, it might be warm and bright, but it's not going to fuel any interstellar civilizations, is it? The class laughed, more out of nervous energy than genuine amusement. But don't be fooled by these softer alternatives, Zyx'nax warned, his tone suddenly serious. They're just gateway drinks. Today it's chamomile tea. Tomorrow it's a triple shot espresso with extra whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon. Humans are nothing if not adaptable in their pursuit of caffeinated bliss. He began pacing again, his tentacles swirling in complex patterns that reflected his inner turmoil. And here's the truly terrifying part, class. Humans have started to spread their coffee obsession to the stars. There are reports, unconfirmed, of course, of human space stations with more coffee makers than escape pods, of interstellar freighters carrying nothing but coffee beans, of diplomatic incidents caused by one species offering another decaf as if it were real coffee. The professor's voice dropped to a whisper. There are even rumors of humans terraforming planets not for colonization, but for coffee production. Imagine that. Reshaping an entire world just so they can have the perfect cup of space Java. A collective shudder ran through the class. The idea of a species so devoted to a single beverage that they'd alter planetary ecosystems was almost too much to comprehend. But wait, Zyx'nax exclaimed, his voice suddenly bright again. Before you all go running to the nearest airlock in terror, let me share with you the silver lining in this caffeinated cloud. You see, coffee might just be humanity's greatest weakness and its greatest strength. He pulled up a final hologram, this one showing a diverse group of humans gathered around a large table, all clutching mugs of coffee. This, class, is what humans call a coffee break. It's a social ritual centered around the communal consumption of their beloved tea. And here's the kicker, some of humanity's greatest ideas, their most groundbreaking discoveries, have come out of these coffee-fueled gatherings. The professor's voice took on an almost reverent tone, faster than light travel. Conceived over a late-night espresso, the cure for the common cold. Scribbled on a napkin during a cappuccino-fueled brainstorming session, the secret to unlocking stable wormholes? You guessed it, the result of a barista accidentally making a physicist lat with 6 shots instead of 2. He chuckled, his tentacles waving in a pattern that could only be described as bemused admiration. It's as if they've harnessed the chaotic energy of their death world and distilled it into a beverage, using it to fuel not just their bodies but their very civilization. A quantum probability matrix in the front row fluctuated uncertainly. Professor, are you suggesting that coffee is the secret to humanity's success in the galaxy? Zyx'nax's eyes glinted mischievously. Am I suggesting it? My dear probability wave, I'm outright stating it. Coffee isn't just a beverage for humans, it's the lubricant that keeps the gears of their society turning. It's the fuel that powers their innovations, the social glue that binds their communities, and the universal language that transcends their myriad cultures. He pulled up a hologram showing the history of human space exploration, each milestone accompanied by a steaming cup of coffee. Look here, class. The first human on their moon, powered by coffee. Their first interplanetary colony, built by engineers running on a perpetual caffeine high. The invention of their first warp drive. Legend has it the scientist responsible had been awake for 72 hours straight, sustained only by something they call espresso con panna. The class stared in a mixture of awe and horror at the holographic timeline of caffeinated human achievements. But here's where it gets really interesting, Zyx'nax continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Some xenoanthropologists theorize that coffee might be the key to understanding human psychology. You see, humans have this fascinating concept called Monday. He paused dramatically, enjoying the confused murmurs that rippled through the classroom. Monday is the first day of their standard work cycle, and it's universally dreaded. And this is the important part, it's made bearable by coffee. There's a human saying, I can't adult today without my coffee. It's as if this miracle brew is the only thing standing between them and total societal collapse every 7 rotations of their planet. A hive mind collective buzzed in confusion. But Professor, Surely a species can't be that dependent on a single substance. What if their coffee supply was cut off? Zyx'nax's tentacles writhed in what might have been suppressed laughter. An excellent question, and one that keeps many a galactic defense strategist awake at night. You see, depriving humans of coffee doesn't weaken them, it makes them more dangerous. A human without coffee is like a malfunctioning black hole, unpredictable, irritable, and prone to destroying everything in its path. He pulled up another hologram, this one showing a simulated human deprived of coffee. The digital human's eyes were wild, its hair disheveled, and it seemed to be muttering incoherently to itself. This class is why coffee is considered a protected resource under the Galactic Convention. The last thing anyone wants is a bunch of cranky, under-caffeinated humans rampaging across the cosmos because someone cut off their coffee supply. There are unconfirmed reports of entire star systems surrendering to human forces not because of superior firepower, but because the humans ran out of coffee and became so irritable that the opposition just gave up out of sheer terror. The class tittered nervously, not entirely sure if the professor was joking or not. But let's not forget the truly mind-bending part of all this. Zyx'nax continued, his voice filled with wonder. Humans don't just drink coffee because they need it. They've turned it into an art form, a science, a philosophy. They debate brewing methods with the same fervor other species reserve for religion or politics. They have coffee sommeliers for Zorp's sake. Can you imagine dedicating your life to the study and appreciation of what is essentially liquid madness? He shook his head in bemused disbelief. They have drinks like flat white macchiato and cold brew nitro. It's like they're not content with just ingesting rocket fuel. They have to constantly invent new and exciting ways to consume it. I swear, sometimes I think humans are just daring the universe to try and stop them. A photosynthetic empath in the back row raised a leaf hesitantly. Professor, is it true that humans also consume coffee, recreationally, even when they don't need the energy boost? Zyx'nax's eyes widened in delight. Ah, I was hoping someone would ask about that. Yes, my chlorophyll-rich friend, humans don't just drink coffee for the energy, they drink it for pleasure. Can you believe it? They've developed a fondness, an actual affection, for a substance that by all rights should have them bouncing off the walls of their spacecraft. He pulled up a hologram of a cozy human living room, where two humans sat chatting over steaming mugs of coffee. Look at this. They call this catching up over coffee. It's a social ritual, a bonding experience. They use coffee as an excuse to spend time together, to share ideas, to strengthen relationships. It's as if they've taken this potent chemical stimulant and turned it into a tool for emotional connection. Frankly, I'm not sure if it's brilliant or utterly insane. The professor's tentacles waved in a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. You know, sometimes I wonder if coffee isn't the real reason humans haven't made much contact with the galactic community at large. They're probably too busy arguing about whether light roast or dark roast is superior to bother with trivial matters like intergalactic diplomacy. He chuckled at his own joke, a sound like gravel in a blender. A few brave students joined in, while others looked around nervously, as if expecting a caffeine-fueled human to burst through the wall at any moment. But let's not forget the true insanity of this situation, Zyx'nax continued, his voice rising with excitement. Humans didn't evolve to consume coffee. They discovered it. Can you imagine? Some ancient human stumbled upon these beans, probably thought, these look poisonous. I should definitely roast them, grind them up, run hot water through them, and then drink the result, and instead of dying horribly, they invented a cultural phenomenon. He shook his head in disbelief. It's like they're playing some cosmic game of chance with their own biochemistry. Oh, look, a new plant. Let's see what happens if we eat it. It's a miracle they didn't poison themselves into extinction before they even discovered fire. The professor pulled up another hologram, this time showing the global distribution of coffee production. Look at this, class. Humans cultivate this stuff on a planetary scale. They've shaped entire ecosystems to produce more of this miraculous bean. There are regions of their planet dedicated solely to growing coffee. Can you imagine? Reshaping your world's biosphere for the sake of a beverage. A silicon-based crystalline entity chimed in, its voice resonating like a tuning fork. But Professor, surely there must be negative consequences to consuming such a potent substance in such large quantities. Zyx'nax's tentacles wiggled in what might have been a shrug. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the truly baffling part. Humans have adapted to consume truly staggering amounts of coffee with minimal side effects. Oh sure, they might get a bit jittery if they overdo it. And there's the infamous coffee breath that can strip paint at 20 pat street. They've turned what should be a dangerously potent stimulant into their morning pick-me-up. He pulled up a series of medical scans showing a human brain before and after coffee consumption. The after scan looked like a Eucorian fireworks display. Look at this. Any other species ingesting a substance that lights up the brain like this would be writing their last will and testament. Humans? They call this Tuesday morning. The class stared in horrified fascination at the scans. But don't think for a moment that humans are content with just coffee, Zyx'nax warned, his tone suddenly serious. Oh no, these madcaps have an entire category of beverages they call energy drinks. Imagine coffee, but engineered by beings who looked at rocket fuel and thought, nah, not potent enough. He pulled up an image of various brightly colored cans, each bearing names that sounded more like weapons of mass destruction than beverages. Monster, Red Bull, Rockstar. These aren't drinks, they're lethal weapons in liquid form. And humans chug these like it's nothing. There are reports of humans mixing these with coffee for something they call a depth charge. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know about the sanity of these beings. A gravity manipulator student raised a gravitational field inquisitively. Professor, given humans' apparent addiction to these stimulants, could this be exploited as a weakness in case of, say, an interstellar conflict? Zyx'nax's eyes narrowed, his chromatophores flashing warning colors. An astute question, but a dangerous line of thinking. My gravitationally gifted friend. Attempting to deprive humans of coffee doesn't weaken them, it turns them into something far, far worse. He pulled up a classified military report, the hologram flickering with top-secret warnings. There was an incident a few cycles ago. A well-meaning but woefully misguided galactic peacekeeping force attempted to cut off the coffee supply to a human colony world. They thought it would make the humans more docile, easier to negotiate with. The professor's voice dropped to a whisper, his tentacles curling in remembered horror. The humans didn't become docile. They became rage incarnate. Within 3 standard rotations, they had reverse-engineered the peacekeepers faster than light drives, weaponized their own cleaning nanobots, and were threatening to turn the nearest sun into a supernova, unless their coffee demands were met. A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. The Galactic Council capitulated immediately. Of course, Zyx'nax continued, his voice regaining some of its usual pep. These days, ensuring a steady supply of coffee to human-inhabited worlds is considered a top priority for galactic peace. Some cynics argue that humans orchestrated the whole incident just to ensure they'd never run out of coffee again. Personally, I wouldn't put it past them. He chuckled, a sound like pebbles in a blender. You've got to admire their dedication, really. Imagine reshaping galactic trade policies just to secure your morning brew. It's either brilliant or completely unhinged. With humans, the line between the two is often blurrier than a Neptunian's vision after a night of fermented methane consumption. The professor's tentacles suddenly shot up in excitement. Oh, and let's not forget the cultural impact of coffee on human society. They have entire restaurant chains dedicated to serving nothing but coffee and coffee-adjacent products. Starbucks, Costa, Tim Hortons. These aren't just businesses, they're caffeinated temples where humans go to worship at the altar of the almighty being. He pulled up a hologram of a bustling coffee shop. Humans of all shapes and sizes lining up to receive their liquid enlightenment. Look at this, class. See how they congregate, how they perform their daily rituals of ordering, waiting, and finally receiving their precious brew. It's like watching a highly caffeinated ballet. A telepathic cephalopod student raised a tentacle. Professor, I'm sensing a great deal of conflicting emotions from you regarding humans and their coffee consumption. Are you perhaps envious? Zyx'nax's chromatophores flashed in surprise, then settled into a pattern that might have been embarrassment. That's not. He sighed, a sound like air escaping from a punctured gas giant. Oh, all right, I'll admit it. Part of me does wonder what it would be like to experience this coffee high that humans seem to enjoy so much. But alas, my biology is simply not compatible with caffeine. One sip and I'd probably end up vibrating into another dimension. The class chuckled, some in amusement, others in nervous relief at their professor's admission. But that's precisely what makes humans so fascinating, Zyx'nax continued, his enthusiasm returning full force. They've taken a substance that would be lethal to most species and turned it into the cornerstone of their civilization. It's not just a beverage, it's a way of life. They have coffee houses that have stood for centuries, brewing traditions passed down through generations, philosophers who ponder the meaning of existence over a steaming cup of Java. He shook his head in wonder. In many ways, coffee is a microcosm of humanity itself. Complex, bitter yet oddly appealing, capable of bringing out both the best and worst in those who partake. It's a testament to their adaptability, their creativity, and yes, their sheer, unmitigated insanity. The professor's tentacles waved in a grand, sweeping gesture. And that, class, is why we study humans. Not just because they're a fascinating species from a terrifying death world, not just because they're rapidly becoming a major player in galactic politics, but because they embody a truth that we, as xenobiologists, must always remember. Life finds a way. Even if that way involves regularly ingesting liquid rocket fuel as part of a balanced breakfast. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall and started slightly. Great galaxies, is that the time already? I suppose I got a bit carried away. But can you blame me? Humans and their coffee are just so invigorating to discuss. The class laughed, the tension of the lecture finally breaking. For your assignment, Zyx'nax said, his tentacles moving in the elegant patterns of formal academic instruction, I want you all to research other human beverages. Energy drinks, tea, something called yerba mate, anything that isn't coffee. Let's see if we can figure out if their other drinks are just as insane, or if coffee truly is the apex of human liquid lunacy. As the students began to file out, chattering excitedly about their assignment, Zyx'nax called out one final time. "Oh, in class, if any of you happen to figure out a way for non-humans to safely experience coffee, well, let's just say you'd make one very curious professor very happy." Class dismissed. The lecture hall emptied, leaving Professor Zyx'nax alone with his thoughts and his holograms. He gazed wistfully at the image of the steaming coffee cup, still floating in the center of the room. Someday, he murmured to himself, his tentacles curling around an imaginary mug. "Someday I'll find a way to try you, you magnificent, maddening brew." And when I do, he chuckled softly. Well, the galaxy had better watch out, because if coffee can make humans do all this, he gestured at the various holograms of human achievements still flickering around the room. Imagine what it could do for a biology that isn't from a death world. With a final, longing look at the coffee hologram, Professor Zyx'nax slithered out of the lecture hall, his mind buzzing with caffeinated dreams of human-inspired galactic domination. After all, he mused, if you can't beat them, maybe you should find a way to join them in their coffee-fueled madness. As the lights dimmed in the empty hall, the holographic coffee cup continued to steam, a silent testament to the brew that conquered not just a planet, but an entire species and perhaps one day the galaxy itself. Weeks later, the Galactic University was abuzz with excitement. Professor Zyx'nax's lecture on human coffee consumption had gone viral, spreading across the known universe faster than a caffeinated human's thoughts. Alien species from all corners of the galaxy were suddenly fascinated by this strange human beverage. Some brave souls even attempted to replicate it, resulting in a rash of incidents that kept the galactic emergency response teams busier than a barista during morning rush hour. Meanwhile, human coffee shops began popping up on space stations and alien worlds, marketed as extreme thrill experiences. Aliens would don protective suits just to sit in the same room as humans casually sipping their lattes. And Professor Zyx'nax, he became an overnight celebrity, dubbed the Coffee Whisperer by the galactic media. He was last seen boarding a ship bound for Earth, muttering something about field research and clutching a custom-made environment suit with a specialized coffee intake apparatus. As for the humans, they remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic kerfuffle their favorite beverage had caused. They were too busy arguing about whether pumpkin spice lattes should be classified as a crime against coffeeanity. And so, the great galactic coffee saga continued, proving once and for all that in the vast, weird universe, there's nothing quite as strange, terrifying, or oddly appealing as a good cup of joe. The end, or is it just the beginning of a very jittery eternity?